is up, party people? So we are in Ruth chapter 1. This is the summary section of chapter 1. It's verses 19 through 22. So up until now, we saw that Naomi had traveled with her family away from Bethlehem to Moab, that her husband had died, that her sons who had married foreign women, the two sons have died. So she's left with two daughters-in-law, not her blood relatives. She sets them free. There's a very touching scene where she says, look, I have nothing for you. Go out and make lives for yourself. One of them goes back to their foreign gods and household and all of that. But Ruth clings to her. Ruth says, no, I'm going to be loyal to you. I'm going to stick it out with you, and we're going to get through this. So when Naomi sees that Ruth is not going to turn back, Ruth of the biblical storybook Ruth fame, she's like, no, I'm not having it. I'm going to go with you. Your God is going to be my God. So there's an adoption here of Ruth saying, there's something here. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to be loyal. I'm going to love you. I'm going to follow this commitment that I made, and I'm going to follow you back to Israel, to Bethlehem. And we see in this first chapter some pragmatism popping up, but we also see God's sovereign plan. And I think the next few verses speak a lot to God's sovereign plan for Naomi and Ruth, and how Naomi sees God's sovereign plan. So with that, we'll read Ruth chapter 1, verses 19 through 22. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? She said to them, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So there's actually a lot going on here in these, few short verses, 4 short verses. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. So they go back to Naomi's home. And the whole town is stirred because of Ruth and Naomi coming home. They probably are stirred because Naomi's coming home alone. They didn't have, mail or phones back then, so they probably hadn't seen her in a long, long time. Maybe if they were gone for a decade, maybe they had traveled back home at some point. I don't know, right? But it doesn't seem like it, because they're pretty shocked when they show up. So she says, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. This is a very, I think, well-known thing because of this book, but Mara literally means bitter. So there's almost like a mini Job story happening here, that she says, I went away full and the Lord has brought me back empty. Even in Job, there's a restoration at the end of the book, but Naomi hasn't had a restoration yet. In fact, this book is the story of restoring Naomi's line. And it has to happen through a foreign woman, a Moabite. And they keep referring to Ruth as a Moabite or a foreigner. So Naomi's attributing all of this to God. She's saying, look, I went away full, the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me? The Almighty has brought calamity upon me. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, right? And so there's this, Naomi is attributing all of this bitterness to God's hand. She's saying, we went away and God has taken everything from me. Now, Ruth is the one thing that hasn't been taken from her, this Moabite woman. Another interesting point here is that they come to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So they're coming back to Bethlehem in the spring. This is kind of placing it in a specific time. Spring is actually symbolic, though. I mean, yeah, I think they came back in the spring, but spring is a time of new birth, of regrowth, of, fresh things coming up. So I think that's very intentional. So after this famine, they're getting to Bethlehem, the house of bread, in the spring with the barley harvest. And we see that there's a lot of good that comes out of the fruit of our labor, working, being in the fields, actually, doing life. That's something that I think we're increasingly seeing in culture and society today, is this like divorce of actually doing things like being out in a field. Most people have never seen barley, have ever seen barley grain. I only have because I'm a home brewer, like I brew my own beer. You use barley for that, but most people wouldn't even know what those grains look like, or what they look like in the field. It looks like big tall grass, right? So this kind of disconnect. But I think what's a beautiful thing in this book is that it shows Ruth and Naomi working and doing things. There's a lot of things that they hear in the field. There's a lot of good that comes out of their labor. And there's this kind of rebirth that happens as they participate in it. Also, we see in the first chapter, there are multiple points of pragmatism. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, leaves because he's being pragmatic. He's saying, there's a famine here, let's go provide for our family somewhere else. Or it's the time of the judges. Maybe it was a violent area that they lived in, and he was saying, look, we're not going to be a part of this right now. We're gonna move. Then there's pragmatism on Naomi's part, where she says, hey, you girls go back to your family's homes, worship your own gods, go back to what's familiar. And Ruth, it doesn't explicitly say why Ruth clings to her. We don't know if she really loved Naomi, if Naomi was just such a good mother-in-law to her that she didn't want to go. Obviously, Naomi cares very deeply about them, and that goes both ways with her and Ruth. And so there's this clinging, there's this trusting, there's this faith in taking that step to not leave her mother-in-law. And we see that. So they do go back. There's this idea of pragmatism and God's plan. And it's a complex relationship as well, because it's not just like the whole point of the story is don't do any work because God's plan. And it's not like the point of the story here is you have to do all the work because God's plan. It's really that pragmatism is okay, but first you should trust and have faith in God's promises and his plan. And so I think that's an interesting part of this book here. So that's the first chapter. Let me know in the comments what you liked about this chapter, what stood out to you about this section. If you'd like and subscribe, you'll catch all these videos as they come out. That's chapter 1. We're going to be jumping into chapter 2 next. I'm doing a little bit different setups for each of the books of the Bible as I kind of see how it works. Ruth made sense to just kind of go through in sections and break it up that way. So we'll see what evolves out of this. But we will see in chapter 2 coming up next. So I've got that to look forward to. Anyways, that's all I've got. Peace.